12-year-old Amara stood in the bustling airport terminal, her heart racing with excitement. Today was special. Today, she was flying all by herself for the very first time. Her small rolling suitcase stood beside her, covered in colorful stickers she'd carefully chosen the night before. In her hand, she clutched her boarding pass like it was made of gold. The airport was busier than she'd imagined. People rushed past her in every direction, pulling luggage, checking phones, calling out to family members. The smell of coffee and fresh pastries drifted from nearby shops. Announcements echoed overhead, listing flights and gates in a voice that sounded almost robotic. But none of that mattered to Amara. She was going to visit her Aunt Michelle across the country, and she'd get to see her 3 little cousins, who she hadn't hugged in over a year. Her mother had dropped her off at the entrance 30 minutes earlier. Before leaving, she'd knelt down, looked Amara straight in the eyes, and given her detailed instructions. Stay near the gate. Don't talk to strangers. Keep your phone charged. Call as soon as you land. Then she'd kissed Amara's forehead and said something that made Amara's chest swell with pride. "You're growing up so fast, baby. I trust you completely." Now, standing at gate 12, Amara checked her boarding pass again. First class. Seat 2. Her mother had surprised her with the upgrade, saying that if she was going to fly alone, she might as well be comfortable. Amara had looked up pictures of first-class seats online the night before. The big leather chairs that reclined almost flat. The extra legroom. The fancy meals served on actual plates instead of plastic trays. She could hardly wait. The line to board was starting to form. Families clustered together. Business people typed on laptops while standing, and flight attendants in crisp navy uniforms checked tickets at the gate. Amara joined the line, positioning herself behind a man in a gray suit who was talking loudly on his phone about some meeting he needed to make in Seattle. When it was finally her turn, Amara stepped forward with a bright smile. The flight attendant at the podium was a woman with blonde hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Her name tag read Linda, and her lips were pressed into a thin line that didn't seem welcoming at all. "Ticket," Linda said flatly, barely glancing up. Amara handed over her boarding pass, still smiling. She'd practiced being polite and confident, just like her mother taught her. Linda took the pass, and her eyes immediately narrowed. She looked at the ticket, then at Amara, then back at the ticket again. The smile on Amara's face started to falter. "Is there a problem?" Amara asked quietly. Linda didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned and called over another flight attendant, a man with red hair and a scattered expression. "Brian, come look at this." Brian walked over, and the two of them huddled together, whispering while stealing glances at Amara. The people behind her in line were starting to shift impatiently. Amara felt heat creeping up her neck. Something was wrong, but she didn't understand what. "Where did you get this ticket?" Linda finally asked, her voice sharp and accusatory. "My mom bought it for me," Amara replied, confusion mixing with the first hints of worry. "She booked it online last week." Linda's eyebrows shot up. "Your mother bought you a first-class ticket?" "Yes, ma'am." "Uh-huh." Linda's tone dripped with disbelief. She examined the ticket again, holding it up to the light as if checking for counterfeit money. "This doesn't look right to me." "I don't understand," Amara said, her voice getting smaller. "What doesn't look right?" "The ticket. Something's off about it." Linda turned to Brian again. "Does this look legitimate to you?" Brian shrugged unhelpfully. "I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe?" Other passengers were definitely getting annoyed now. Someone behind Amara sighed loudly. Another person muttered something under their breath. Amara wanted to disappear. She felt dozens of eyes boring into her back. "I need to see some identification," Linda demanded. Amara fumbled with her small backpack. Pulling out the unaccompanied minor documentation, her mother had prepared. She handed over everything: her school ID, the special travel letter, her aunt's contact information. Linda barely looked at any of it. "This still doesn't explain how a child your age has a first-class ticket," Linda said, her voice rising just enough that people around them could definitely hear. "These tickets cost over $800. Amara's cheeks burned. "My mom works really hard. She saved up because she wanted me to be comfortable on my first solo flight." Really? It wasn't a question. It was pure skepticism wrapped in a single word. "Yes, really," Amara insisted, feeling tears starting to prick at her eyes. She refused to cry. "Not here. Not in front of all these people." Linda exchanged another look with Brian, then made a decision. "I'm going to need to call my supervisor. There's clearly been some kind of mistake here." "There's no mistake," Amara said, her voice cracking slightly despite her best efforts. "Please, just scan the ticket. It'll work. I promise it will. I'm not scanning anything until we get to the bottom of this." Linda picked up a phone at the podium and pressed a few buttons. While she waited for someone to answer, she kept staring at Amara with open suspicion. The man who'd been behind Amara in line finally stepped out and walked around her, shooting her an uncomfortable glance before moving to the other boarding line. Others followed. Soon, Amara stood alone at Linda's podium while everyone else chose the other entrance to the plane. A supervisor arrived within minutes. He was an older man with gray hair and a tired expression that suggested he'd dealt with too many problems already today. His name tag identified him as Jeff. "What's the situation?" he asked Linda. "This child has a first-class ticket that I believe may be fraudulent," Linda explained, her voice dripping with false professionalism. "I've asked for additional documentation, but nothing she's shown me proves this ticket was purchased legitimately." "It's not fake," Amara burst out, unable to stay quiet anymore. "My mom bought it. She works at a hospital. She's a doctor. She saved up to buy me this ticket." Jeff held up a hand. "Calm down, young lady. Getting emotional won't help the situation." Amara bit her lip hard, tasting blood. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "I can call her right now. She'll explain everything." "I'm sure she will," Linda said in a tone that made it clear she wasn't sure of anything except her own assumptions. Amara dialed her mother's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then went to voicemail. "You've reached Dr. Simone Davis. I'm unable to take your call right now. Please leave a detailed message, and I'll return your call as soon as possible." "She's not answering," Amara whispered, staring at her phone like it had betrayed her. "She's in meetings all day today. She told me she wouldn't be able to answer, but I could leave messages." "How convenient," Linda muttered, just loud enough for Amara to hear. Jeff examined the boarding pass himself, turning it over in his hands. "Look, I'm not saying there's definitely fraud here, but I also can't just let someone board with a questionable ticket. We have protocols for a reason. It's not questionable." Amara's voice broke, and the tears she'd been fighting finally spilled over. "Please, just scan it. It will go through. I promise." But Linda had already made up her mind. In one swift motion, she tore the boarding pass cleanly in half. The sound of ripping paper seemed impossibly loud in that moment. Amara stared at her destroyed ticket, watching as Linda dropped both pieces into a trash can beside the podium. "We can't allow fraud on our aircraft," Linda announced, her voice carrying to the remaining passengers who were openly watching now. "If you'd like, I can offer you an economy seat instead, but that's the best I can do." Amara couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't process what had just happened. Her ticket, the special surprise from her mother, the symbol of trust and growing up, was sitting in the garbage like it meant nothing at all. Around her, passengers whispered to each other. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked judgmental. Most just looked away, uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before them, but unwilling to get involved. And Amara stood there, tears streaming down her face, wondering what she'd done wrong to deserve this humiliation. Amara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. Her chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing all the air out of her lungs. The economy ticket Jeff handed her felt like paper evidence of her humiliation. Seat 27B, middle seat, all the way in the back of the plane. "You should be grateful we're letting you board at all," Linda said, turning back to help other passengers as if nothing significant had just happened. As if she hadn't just destroyed a child's ticket and accused her of being a criminal. Amara wanted to argue, wanted to scream that this wasn't fair, that her mother had paid good money for that first-class seat, that she'd done nothing wrong. But the words stuck in her throat. She was 12 years old, standing alone in an airport, and every adult around her seemed to think she was lying. What chance did she have? She picked up her little suitcase and walked toward the boarding tunnel, her legs feeling wobbly. As she moved down the narrow corridor leading to the plane, she tried calling her mother 3 more times. Each time, it went straight to voicemail. She left a message on the 3rd attempt, her voice shaking so badly she could barely get the words out. "Mom, something really bad happened. They tore up my ticket. They said it was fake. I tried to tell them you bought it, but they didn't believe me. I'm getting on the plane now, but I'm in economy. I'm scared. Please call me back as soon as you can." The airplane felt smaller than she'd imagined. The narrow aisle barely fit one person at a time. She had to squeeze past business people settling into their comfortable seats, past families getting their children situated, past flight attendants organizing overhead bins. When she finally reached row 27, her heart sank even further. She was sandwiched between a large man who'd already claimed both armrests and a teenager who had his hood pulled up and headphones blasting music so loud. Amara could hear it from where she stood. Neither of them looked up as she struggled to lift her suitcase into the overhead compartment. It was heavier than she remembered, and her arms felt weak from crying. "Need help with that?" a voice asked. Amara turned to see an elderly woman across the aisle, her kind face creased with concern. "I've got it," Amara mumbled, not wanting any more attention. She finally managed to shove the suitcase in and slumped into her middle seat, making herself as small as possible. The man beside her let out an annoyed sigh, as if her presence was a personal inconvenience. The teenager never acknowledged her existence. Amara buckled her seatbelt with trembling fingers and stared at the seat in front of her, willing herself not to cry anymore. She thought about the first-class seat that should have been hers. Seat 2 up by the window, with extra space and a warm blanket and maybe even a hot meal served on real dishes. Instead, she could barely move without bumping into the people on either side of her. The air back here felt stuffier, warmer. The overhead bins were already packed full, and the bathrooms were just a few rows away, meaning she'd probably smell them for the entire 5-hour flight as the plane prepared for takeoff. Amara caught a glimpse of Linda walking down the aisle, checking that everyone had their seatbelts fastened. When Linda reached row 27, her eyes landed on Amara. For just a second, something flickered across Linda's face. But it wasn't guilt or regret. It was satisfaction. Like she'd done something right by putting Amara in her place. Linda moved on without a word, and Amara felt something shift inside her. The embarrassment was still there, hot and heavy in her stomach. But now it was mixing with something else. Anger. Pure, burning anger at how unfair this all was. The plane lifted off the ground, and Amara pressed her forehead against the seat in front of her. She'd been so excited about this trip. For weeks, she'd counted down the days. She'd practiced packing her suitcase 3 times to make sure she had everything. She'd made a list of all the things she wanted to do with her cousins. And now the whole experience felt ruined before it had even really begun. 2 hours into the flight, the drink cart came around. The man beside her ordered a whiskey. The teenager got a Coke without even removing his headphones. When the flight attendant, a younger woman with a tired smile, asked Amara what she wanted, she could barely speak. "Just water, please," she whispered. The flight attendant handed her a small plastic cup filled with ice and water. "You doing okay, sweetie? You look a little upset." Amara nodded quickly, not trusting herself to speak without crying again. The flight attendant lingered for a moment, like she wanted to say something else. But the cart was blocking the aisle, and people behind her were waiting. She moved on. Amara sipped her water slowly, trying to make it last. She pulled out her phone and opened the photo gallery, scrolling through pictures of her and her mother. There was one from her birthday last month, both of them laughing at something her aunt had said during the video call. Another from their trip to the zoo last summer, standing in front of the elephant exhibit. Her mother was always smiling in these photos, always looking at Amara like she was the most important person in the world. Her mother worked so hard. Amara knew that. Dr. Simone Davis was a surgeon at one of the biggest hospitals in the city. She worked long hours, sometimes coming home after Amara was already asleep. But she always made time for the important things. Always showed up for school events. Always helped with homework, no matter how tired she was. And she'd saved up to buy this first-class ticket because she wanted Amara's first solo flight to be special dot, and Linda had torn it up. Like it was garbage. Amara tried to distract herself by watching the tiny screen on the back of the seat in front of her. But nothing held her attention. The man beside her fell asleep and started snoring, his shoulder pressing against hers. The teenager's music got even louder. A baby several rows behind started crying, the sound echoing through the cabin. 3 hours into the flight, Linda walked past again. This time, she paused at row 27, looking down at Amara with an expression that made Amara's skin crawl. It was the same look teachers gave students they'd already decided were troublemakers. The same look security guards in stores sometimes gave her and her mother when they were just shopping for groceries. "I hope you've learned something today," Linda said quietly, leaning down slightly. "About honesty. About not trying to take things that don't belong to you." Amara's jaw dropped. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Linda was actually lecturing her, actually acting like she'd done something wrong, when all Amara had done was try to board a plane with a legitimate ticket her mother had purchased. "I didn't do anything wrong," Amara said, finding her voice despite the lump in her throat. "My mother bought that ticket. She's a doctor. She works at Memorial Hospital. You can call and check if you don't believe me." Linda's smile was cold. "Sweetheart, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know when something doesn't add up. And you should really think about the example you're setting." She walked away before Amara could respond, leaving her sitting there with her mouth open and her fists clenched so tight her nails dug into her palms. The elderly woman across the aisle had been watching the exchange, and when Amara caught her eye, the woman shook her head sadly but said nothing. Nobody said anything. Nobody stood up for her. The passengers who'd witnessed what happened at the gate had either forgotten about it or decided it wasn't their problem. Amara was alone in a sea of strangers, and not one of them seemed to care that she'd been treated like a criminal for no reason at all. The rest of the flight dragged by in miserable slow motion. Amara didn't eat the small bag of pretzels they handed out, didn't watch any movies, didn't sleep. She just sat there, staring at nothing, replaying the whole terrible experience over and over in her mind. When the plane finally began its descent, Amara felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that this nightmare flight was almost over. Dread about having to tell her aunt what happened. about having to explain why she looked like she'd been crying for hours, about having to relive the whole humiliating experience. The wheels touched down with a bump, and passengers immediately started gathering their belongings, eager to get off the plane. Amara waited until almost everyone else had left before standing up. Her legs had fallen asleep from sitting so still for so long, and pins and needles shot through them as she pulled down her suitcase. As she walked up the aisle toward the exit, she passed the first-class section. Those big leather seats she'd seen in pictures online were even nicer in person. One of them should have been hers. Seat 2 up by the window. Instead, she'd spent 5 hours crammed in the back, being judged and lectured by a flight attendant who decided Amara was a liar based on nothing but assumptions. Linda stood at the exit, thanking passengers as they left. When Amara reached her, Linda's smile disappeared. "Have a nice day," she said flatly, the words carrying no warmth at all. Amara didn't respond. She just walked past, pulling her suitcase behind her, and headed into the terminal to find her aunt. She had no idea that her mother had finally listened to her voicemail. No idea that Dr. Simone Davis was already making phone calls. No idea that Linda's smug satisfaction was about to come crashing down around her. All Amara knew was that she'd been treated terribly, and she'd never felt so small in her entire life. Aunt Michelle spotted Amara the moment she came through the arrivals gate. Her face lit up with excitement, arms already outstretched for a hug. But her smile faltered when she got a good look at her niece. Amara's eyes were red and puffy. Her shoulders were slumped. She looked like she'd been through something terrible. "Baby girl, what happened?" Michelle asked, pulling Amara into a tight embrace right there in the middle of the busy terminal. That's all it took. Amara burst into tears again, sobbing into her aunt's shoulder while travelers flowed around them like water around a rock. Michelle didn't ask any more questions. She just held her niece, rubbing her back and making soothing sounds until the crying slowed down. They made it to the car before Amara could finally speak. Sitting in the passenger seat with her seatbelt on, staring out at the parking garage, she told her aunt everything. Every awful detail. How Linda had looked at her ticket with suspicion. How she'd called her supervisor. How they both acted like Amara was some kind of criminal trying to steal a seat she hadn't paid for. How Linda had torn up the ticket right in front of everyone. How she'd spent 5 hours in a cramped middle seat, being treated like she should be grateful they let her on the plane at all. Michelle's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she listened. Her jaw clenched. By the time Amara finished talking, Michelle looked angrier than Amara had ever seen her. "That woman had no right," Michelle said, her voice shaking. "None of them did. They humiliated you. They made you feel like you'd done something wrong when you hadn't." "I tried to tell them," Amara whispered. "I tried to explain that Mom bought the ticket, but they wouldn't listen. They looked at me like I was lying." Michelle pulled out her phone at the next red light. "Your mother needs to know about this right now." "I left her messages," Amara said. "But she's in surgery all day. She won't get them until tonight." "Well, tonight just got moved up." Michelle's tone left no room for argument. She pulled into a parking lot and put the car in park. Then she dialed her sister's number. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. Michelle tried again and again. On the 4th attempt, someone finally answered, but it wasn't Simone. "Dr. Davis's phone. This is Nurse Chun speaking." "This is Michelle Davis, her sister. I need to speak with her immediately. It's a family emergency." There was a pause. "Dr. Davis is currently in surgery. She won't be available for at least another 2 hours. Then, you need to get a message to her the second she's out," Michelle said firmly. "Tell her to call me immediately. Tell her it's about Amara. Tell her it's urgent." After she hung up, Michelle reached over and squeezed Amara's hand. Your mom is going to fix this, baby. I promise you that. They drove to Michelle's house in silence. Amara's 3 little cousins rushed to greet her at the door, excited and chattering about all the things they wanted to do together. But Michelle quietly explained that Amara needed some rest first, and she shepherded the disappointed kids into the backyard to play. Amara sat on the guest room bed, staring at her phone. She kept replaying the moment when Linda tore that ticket in half. The sound of it. The look on Linda's face. The way everyone had stared at her. 2 hours felt like 2 days. When Michelle's phone finally rang, she answered before the first ring even finished. Simone. Amara could hear her mother's voice through the phone, asking what was wrong, if everyone was okay. Michelle took a deep breath and began explaining. Amara listened to her aunt recount the story, hearing the anger building in her mother's voice even from across the room. Put her on, Simone said, and Michelle handed the phone to Amara. Mom? Amara's voice came out small. Baby, I'm so sorry. Her mother's voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. So Amara told the story again. This time, her mother asked questions. What was the flight attendant's name? What did her supervisor look like? What exactly did they say? What time did this happen? Amara answered everything she could remember, her mother's questions helping her recall details she'd forgotten. When Amara finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. Not an empty silence, but the kind that felt heavy with something powerful building beneath the surface. Amara, her mother finally said, her voice different now, calmer, colder. I want you to know something. What happened to you today was wrong. It was discrimination, plain and simple. They treated you that way because they made assumptions about who you are and what you deserve based on how you look. That's not okay. It's never been okay. I know, Amara whispered. And I want you to know that I'm going to handle this. Not just for you, but for every other child who might go through the same thing. Do you understand? Yes, Mom. Good. Now I want you to try to enjoy your time with your aunt and cousins. I know that's hard right now, but try. Can you do that for me? I'll try. I love you so much, baby girl. More than anything in this world. I love you too, Mom. After they hung up, Amara felt something shift. Her mother's voice had been so certain, so strong. Whatever was going to happen next, Amara knew her mother would make it right. What Amara didn't know was what her mother did immediately after that phone call ended. Dr. Simone Davis walked out of the hospital still wearing her scrubs. She sat in her car in the parking garage and made a phone call to her executive assistant, a sharp woman named Patricia, who'd worked with her for 7 years. Patricia, I need you to pull up everything we have on flight attendant Linda Morrison and supervisor Jeff Patterson. Employee files, complaint history, everything. I want it on my desk within the hour. Right away. Dr. Davis, is everything all right? No, Simone said quietly. Everything is very far from all right. Her next call was to the head of legal at Apex Airlines, then to the chief operations officer, then to her head of human resources. Each conversation was brief, direct, and left no room for misunderstanding. There would be an emergency meeting first thing tomorrow morning. Attendance was mandatory. The subject was a serious incident involving discrimination and violation of company policy. Simone drove home and went straight to her home office. Within an hour, Patricia had sent over the files. Simone read through them carefully, taking notes. Linda Morrison had been with the airline for 15 years. Her performance reviews were generally positive, though there were notes about her being overly zealous in checking tickets and occasionally abrasive with customers. But buried in her file were 2 formal complaints from passengers. Both were from 5 years ago. Both alleged discriminatory treatment. Both had been investigated by middle management and deemed unsubstantiated without any real follow-up. Jeff Patterson's file was worse in its own way. He'd been a supervisor for 8 years, and his approach seemed to be avoiding problems rather than solving them. Multiple complaints had been filed against employees under his supervision, and in almost every case, he'd sided with the employee and offered the complaining customer some kind of minor compensation to make the problem go away. Simone sat back in her chair and rubbed her eyes. She built Apex Airlines from nothing. Started with 2 planes and a dream 15 years ago. Now, they had a fleet of 40 aircraft and flew to 30 cities across the country. She'd always insisted on excellence, on treating every passenger with dignity and respect. And somehow, these kinds of problems had still managed to slip through the cracks. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michelle. A photo of Amara sitting on the floor with her 3 cousins, building something with blocks. Amara was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. The sadness was still there, hovering just beneath the surface. Simone felt something harden in her chest. She'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let anyone treat her daughter that way. She thought about all the times she'd missed tucking Amara into bed because of late surgeries. All the school plays she'd had to watch on video instead of in person. All the sacrifices she'd made to build both her medical career and her airline business so that Amara could have a better life. More opportunities, more options, and some flight attendant who decided that a black child couldn't possibly belong in first class had taken a piece of that away. Simone opened her laptop and began typing. She worked through the night, preparing documents, reviewing company policies, and building a case that was absolutely airtight. She sent emails to board members, alerting them to a serious situation that would be addressed immediately. She requested surveillance footage from the airport gate, which her head of security had access to through their agreement with the airport. By 3 in the morning. She had everything she needed. The evidence was clear. The pattern was undeniable. And the solution was going to be swift and thorough. She allowed herself 4 hours of sleep, then woke up and put on her most professional suit. The navy blue one she wore when she needed to command a room. She looked at herself in the mirror and thought about Amara's tear-stained face, about the way her daughter's voice had shaken when she recounted being accused of fraud, about the humiliation of having a ticket torn up in front of dozens of witnesses. Simone Davis had built an empire through hard work, intelligence, and an unwillingness to accept anything less than excellence. Today, she was going to remind everyone at Apex Airlines exactly who was in charge and what she expected from every single person who wore their uniform. Linda Morrison and Jeff Patterson had no idea what was coming, but they were about to find out that when you hurt someone's child, there are consequences. And when that someone happens to own the entire airline, those consequences come swiftly and without mercy.